I don't know if you guys are familiar with Drizly at all, but as we continue to discuss, sort of how things are evolving in the beer industry, it's important that we really consider the changes in consumer purchasing behavior. As more legal drinking age adults experiment with on-demand alcohol delivery services, the folks at the forefront really of this movement are Drizly, a consumer-facing software layer that connects consumers to retailers and helps alcohol companies capture new selling occasions. So much like Uber or Lyft have revolutionized the way people get around a big city, Drizly hopes to capitalize on the growing acceptance of and a shift towards online shopping and instant delivery services like Instacart and Fresh Direct. So the company recently landed $13 million of financing from First Beverage Group, who will be up here, oddly enough, coincidentally enough, just after Cory. And they're already partnered with a lot of top domestic breweries and international breweries and a variety of different alcohol companies as well. So to help us better understand how Drizly operates, please welcome to the stage Cory Rellas from Drizly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Appreciate it. Yep. Let me throw this down. We working here? Great. Well, as I said, my name's Cory Rellas. I'm one of the founders of Drizly, and very much appreciate the opportunity to speak before you guys today. It's a good industry when I was in private equity for 4 years, and you guys actively serve beer, and I'm overdressed with jeans and a jacket on, so it's a hell of a change for me. Couple goals. As I talk to some people in the room, I realize there's still quite a bit of uncertainty as to what Drizly is, what we do, and how we do it. So I do want to spend some time there. Specifically just on the model itself, talk a little bit about the value proposition in the industry across the tiers, and then focus a little bit deeper on what some of the things we're doing with suppliers to make it relevant to yourself, and then just close with 2015. And I do want to leave some time for questions, as there do seem to be quite a bit with apps and the rest. So with that, simply said, Drizly is the largest on-demand alcohol delivery service in the country. As Chris mentioned, we just raised $13 million. We launched Dallas this morning, 17th city. Proud of that. At the same time, that headline is looking to change. We want to become the largest e-commerce provider of alcohol in the country in a very short amount of time. The model is the interesting part, and that's what I'll dive into a little bit here. Simply said, from the consumer perspective, you can go on and download our app on the App Store, Google Play, or you can go to drizly.com. And you give us your location, we will link you to a partner retail store, and what will happen then is you'll then see a live inventory feed of what you can buy at that store. So it's unique to that store you're purchasing from. Click on anything you want, standard e-commerce flow, you'll hit checkout, a delivery driver will show up at your house within 30 to 60 minutes with whatever you ordered, and you can live track them. So pretty simple from the consumer side. The other side of things is kind of the black box that a lot of our time and effort goes into that's really informs the model itself. So when you hit checkout, two important things happen. The first is your order is routed to the store. So when that actually happens, the store will have the ability to say yes or no to that order based on technology we give to the store. So they have driver phones. If you ever used Uber, similar to that, in that they have their own application that we build for them that'll tell them who ordered, what they ordered, the pick list, the price, where they're delivering to, route optimization, and then importantly, ID verification when they do the delivery itself. And I'll dive more into that in a second. So the last part of that is that the store does the delivery. Drizly itself does not do delivery. That's an important distinction, and I'll circle back up to it. The second part of it is when you hit checkout, your credit card is actually linked to a gateway to which the merchant account at the store in which you're purchasing from processes your card. So if you get your receipt at the end of the day, it'll be the store in which you bought the alcohol from showing up on your receipt. That allows us to say that we don't touch money and we don't touch alcohol, which at the end of the day is very important to our model because then we are not part of the alcohol industry. We're a software layer connecting consumers and retailers, not part of the three-tiered system, which then allows us to work across the three tiers. It's an important distinction there. The other kind of 2 or 3 things I want to highlight from a consumer perspective, because I think these get lost in the headlines when people read them. We don't mark up prices. The consumer pays whatever the in-store price is. If that item is on sale in that store, that's what they'll pay. We don't touch it. Some states it's legal to, some states it's not. Not in our purview. We built the model to work as kind of the lowest common denominator. There's many ways a blessing in disguise that we started in Boston. Massachusetts regulatory regime is very tough to live up to, and that's the model we're taking across the country. The second part of that is we don't take a % of sales. That's not how we get paid. Again, it's all about not being part of that transaction. Again, the whole theme here is that we're not disrupting. I know people think of startups, it's disrupting an industry. That's really not what we're doing. We're accelerating the status quo. We're working within the 3 tiers. We're accelerating the incumbent structure. And we think it's a compelling story because we don't have to disrupt anything to add value to retailers, distributors, and the suppliers. And that's really what our model is built on. I threw this up here just as a visual. If anyone hasn't used it, this is the app itself. Recently redone, very proud of it. There's a whole very robust and flexible system behind this to say we may never need to release another app because everything's pushed from a server and is informed by data real time. So we're not going to have to release an app to say, oh, the top banner needs to change. And I'll come full circle to that as to how we're working with suppliers. I actually do think the middle screen's pretty interesting besides the Christopher Walken terrifying picture. It has social aspects. And I was listening this morning about what you order and it'll show up on this. Oddly enough, I didn't think I drank much IPA, and you see it on this when you look at your social profile, and it's 40% of your beer, and that's a little scary. A couple more things about our platform, and I don't want to keep beating this down too much, but we talk a lot about regulatory, and this is how we formed the company back in the day. It was 6 months of understanding the code, how this needed to work, and then the first thing we did was built this ID verification technology. Lucky enough to have the gold standard for ID verification on a stationary set in our backyard in Massachusetts. And what we did was we took that technology and made it mobile and brought it to our stores. Now, as I said, a W-2 employee of the store is the one doing the delivery. So that liability rests with them, and they have the same fiduciary responsibility they would if someone came in the store to check that ID. What we did is give them another tool to say, we don't want to just bring you incremental revenue. We want to bring you and not think of it as incremental risk, but rather we're going to give you a tool to say, if you're uncomfortable, you always have the ability to say no to that order, but here's another tool to check that ID and to make sure that who you're selling to is of legal drinking age. Again, it's completely their decision. The second part is the scalable inventory network. This was a rabbit hole we weren't prepared to jump down when we first started. As you guys in the industry can imagine, UPCs get lost, if there ever were, for some of these things. And what someone might call a Bud Light 12-pack in one store could be fat-fingered at another store or have a space between Bud and Light and be labeled 6-pack spelled rather than with a number. And so what we've had to build is an internal data standardization engine to say what Bud Light is at one store, it is at another store, and then we can present the consumer, whether it be in Chicago, Seattle, or Denver, the same image, metadata, and anything to ensure consistent consumer appeal on that side. It's very hard, and to be honest, that's really what's taken a ton of time, is to really standardize and make the store process consistent. Easier said than done. The last thing I already talked about was the ID verification. On the far right, API, Architecture Programming Interface, literally just a fancy way of saying we have opened up our network to anyone who wants to use it, and I'll touch on this slide. So the last year and a half has really been about turning our stores into delivery nodes. And I don't say that facetiously, I'm saying that in that some are not very sophisticated. Some haven't done delivery before. Some have very different layouts, different consumers, different delivery mechanisms. What we need to do as Drizly is ensure that the consumer has a consistent experience. And so we do that through technology. And that's really what we've become good at. It is a never-ending mission and one that we'll probably be talking about 3 years down the line. But it is a point of pride in that we did tens of thousands of orders last year, and our average delivery time was 28 minutes. And that doesn't come easy, and it comes through a lot of that technology. But really what we've done, and as we see it, is we're building a framework. And if you take one store and replicate it in 2 stores in the same city, and then you move to a different city, and you do that across the United States, what you've actually built is a framework for moving alcohol without ever touching it or the money. What you build on top of that can be very powerful. This is tangential to the conversation, but I do want to bring it up a little bit. A Drizly consumer that we go out and market to and get, it's just one pipeline to acquire a consumer who then shops through Drizly and buys alcohol through a 3-tier compliant way. You can also use that same technology to anyone who has an audience that wants alcohol delivery. So imagine, I'm picking on Bud Light, but it's easy. So budlight.com, if they wanted to embed a Deliver Now button on their website, turn their website into an e-commerce platform, they could do that legally using Drizly's infrastructure by putting a Deliver Now button, because everything is still 3-tier compliant. Messaging comes into play there, but at the end of the day, nothing is changing other than Bud Light putting a Deliver Now button in which the Drizly infrastructure lives. Another example would be using a publisher. You're reading ESPN.com about the Blackhawks win last night, and you see an ad for Macallan 18 on the right-hand side, so that's your celebratory drink. Deliver Now button embedded in there. You click on it, an iframe pops up, put in 3 or 4 pieces of information, go back to reading about the Blackhawks, and your doorbell rings in 30 minutes. That's the power of the network in which you can then layer many things on top of. So before I get to kind of the next phase, which is talking about consumers and working with suppliers a little bit, just the value proposition in general, I've had this question a couple times today now. From the retail side, it's very easy. We're bringing incremental profit, incremental consumers of a kind that they wouldn't get in their store. The mix of product selection due to who we're attracting, the average order size, 3 to 4 times higher. These are profitable consumers that any store would love to have, and that's really the value proposition of the stores. At the end of the day, it's got to make sense for their bottom line if we're going to build anything on top of it. So that's really phase number 1. 2, on the distribution side, as I said at the beginning, 3-tier compliant. We are an e-commerce way to grow an industry that's only about 2% of off-premise sales are e-commerce related right now. So CPG industry is anywhere from 10 to 15% on average, and we're not named Amazon that's going to put up a big warehouse and disrupt everything that way. So that represents an interesting way to accelerate e-commerce without changing the status quo and bringing technology to what, actually I think I was telling someone, the Braxton founder said it better than I do. I said bringing technology to an antiquated industry. I like the line better, bringing technology to a traditional industry. It sounds much softer, I like it. So the last part of that would be the suppliers. Interesting, there's a lot of stuff we can do with suppliers. I would say we're dipping our toe into the water, and I'll show you in what facets here. But we can represent a whole host of things. One, we know a lot about our consumers, not only because they go through an app, and you can literally track everything through an app. It's a little bit terrifying. I can click map what you looked at on any one page. I mean, it gets that detailed. As well as just the fact that we have to know what's in the store at any one time to be able to present you with the correct inventory, so that when you, a supplier, partner with us, we make a promise to you that we're going to get a certain product to a consumer at a certain time, we can deliver on that. So that requires us knowing beforehand what's in that store and operationally what we can do. So moving to that piece, the digital liquor store that is Drizly has afforded us the opportunity to ask some pretty interesting questions. I think we can all agree that the shopping experience hasn't changed a whole lot since Prohibition. A lot of the same aisles. I think Total and Benny's of the world do a heck of a job of adding tasting and the ability to sell private label despite you having no idea what it is. It's actually very impressive. That being said, not a whole lot's changed. But what Drizly allows us to do is sit back and say, if you could design a liquor store today without ever being in it and without ever being disillusioned as to what it is today, how would you design it? The second part of that is thinking about everyone in this room has different taste profiles. So why would we show the same liquor store or the same path through a liquor store to 2 different people? And that's really what technology allows us to do, is to say, how do we create a customized liquor store for whoever comes into our properties? The first part of this, and these are all well-known things that happen in the background in many of our favorite technology companies, personalization. I use Amazon is the best example here. You're shopping for 2 or 3 things. All of a sudden, at the bottom of your page, you didn't even know you're interested in these 3 other items, and then before you know it, they're in your cart because they popped up at the right time with the right messaging, with the right branding. That's personalization. That's showing someone who goes for a $1,000 bottle of Chateau Lafite that when they move into the tequila section, you're not going to show them Jose Cuervo. You might show them a 1942 Don Julio. That can happen, all informed by data in the background, and offer a consumer a much more customized approach. The second part of this is product discovery. The things that people like about going to stores, talking with someone who knows a lot about wine, learning about a region, not being completely paranoid about the parity of choice in front of them, that can happen within an app. We should be able to bring in rich content, ratings, videos, anything that should enrich the shopping experience of a consumer should be able to happen through technology, and that's where we're moving. And then the last thing is just a recommendation. You should be able to answer a few questions. We should be able to learn about you as a consumer just within a few clicks of the app and present you with the right bottle at the right time. At the end of the day, we're all trying to sell more of the product, just in a responsible, three-tier compliant way in digital means. From a supplier perspective, what's interesting about this is that for the first time, you can control how your product is merchandised on a digital shelf. There's a whole lot of implications there, and we'll dig into a few of them. But you, for the first time, have the ability to directly influence a consumer at the point of sale in a three-tier compliant way. And how you do that is interesting because it's never been done within this industry, and we're still dipping our toe into this as we grow. This page is called Enhanced Product Pages. It's a terrible name for what I think is a very exciting thing. On the left-hand side of the page, this is a website page. It is actually within Drizly.com, but you wouldn't necessarily know that except for the top header. What this is an example of is Bulleit Bourbon partnered with us and said, we told them, if you were an e-commerce provider, how would you design how your product is perceived, both brand-wise and how your consumer interacts with this page? Came back, and again, this is all customizable just on how we built things. A couple images up top to show what people were looking at. The second line is a product carousel, so anything in that store that is Bulleit made can flip through, hit buy now from anywhere on that point. The third one is really interesting in that this is Spotify API integration. This is using the social aspect that is inherent in alcohol to really create a connection with their consumer. This could be anything. This could be an Instagram page. This could be a Twitter feed. It could be a YouTube video, the Johnny Walker walking through Scotland fields. This one was Spotify. They want to know, or they wanted to put out 2 or 3 songs that how you should feel, how you should experience Bulleit when you drink it. It's actually really pretty interesting stuff, and incredibly easy through the Spotify's API. The last one on the bottom, just another example, recipes. Interesting things you can do with Bulleit. You can click on a recipe. It then takes you to the 4 products that are put into that recipe, dropped into your cart, good to go. So again, the whole point of this page is to say to a brand or a supplier, if you were an e-commerce provider, how would you want your brand perceived by a consumer who's looking to purchase alcohol? And it's a completely different way of thinking. It's not a top of the funnel, let me put a commercial out there. This is literally interact with them while they have their credit card out at the register. Another example, this is just talking about merchandising. When did they see the product? How do they see it? Is it colored differently? Different ways to stand out, not dictated by the physical limitations of a retailer. I threw this one on there because I think this is interesting. In many ways, Drizly, who launched in Dallas this morning, is effectively the same thing as a craft brand every time we go into a new market. We are fighting to establish capacity, distribution, and consumer awareness in a way that makes sense for all parties involved. And really, we're very much a startup. We are not at the size where I'm going to look at Anheuser-Busch and say, we're going to improve your sales 1% by doing this promotion with me. I'm not going to move enough cases at this point to do that. What I can do is put you next to a hot brand targeting a millennial composition of people that you would be excited to be able to interact with that can drive data that you've never seen. Really, that's the proposition to date, until the point where we are big enough to say, look, if you do this campaign, this is the expected product we're going to move, this is how you're going to ROI on that investment effectively. So this is an example on the bottom here. Direct marketing that we do to consumers when we launch a city, this has been really exciting on the impact we've seen. So examples are direct mailers that go, there's companies that actually do incredibly targeted direct mailing, pick out the exact age, composition within what neighborhoods. Traditional magazine inserts, street team, door hangers, all these things come into play, and this is what we do when we launch a market just to create awareness. What we're starting to do, though, is partner with brands. And I think I put Jack Daniels up here because it was the one I had handy. This works much better with local brands. When we launched Dallas, we did a local brand. And I think the awareness it creates and the local feeling of a national company is very, very important to us. So what this says on the front is, here's the brand. You guys dictate the creative for it, the design for it. How do you want to be perceived? The phone is on there to establish that this is e-commerce. Something's a little different about this. It's not just someone handing you an awareness piece. And on the back, we'll tell you about Drizly and how it interacts with this brand so you can have this delivered within 30 minutes. Might even be a promo code to have the delivery free or something to that effect. That is a great example of what we're doing with a lot of local brands right now to create awareness, not only for their brand, but Drizly, alcohol e-commerce in general, and it's a nice feedback loop for all sides. And I can talk offline about a little bit more about what that actually looks like. I'm not going to focus on the product roadmap. I think it's better. 2015, we've mentioned First Beverages here. We raised some money in the past couple weeks. And 2015 for us really is about doing two things, and it's the simplest things. One, it's about creating the most sophisticated and technologically advanced retailer network to do delivery incredibly efficiently, profitably, and reliably. It's very hard to do, and we're going to continue to focus on it. And then on the other side is generating awareness on the consumer side, not just for Drizly, but for alcohol e-commerce in general. I think that was one of the learnings with our early supplier dealings, which is to say, people don't know that this exists, and if they are told in the right facet, they'll use it, and use it very, very effectively with retention rates that give us an incredible amount of optimism. But at the same time, just from a general awareness standpoint, is very, very low, and that's what we need to work on in the coming months. So with that, I don't think I have a whole lot else. I know you wanted some time for questions, Chris.
Yeah, let's do it. Thank you, Cory. Round of applause for Cory.
What do you want me?
Seat in the big chair here.
All you.
Almost like just sink into this thing. So,
That's nice.
a lot of interesting stuff there. Clearly you guys are still, just scratching the surface here, and still getting going. I know there's, probably not too much you can share in the way of actual numbers and figures, but as much as you can. I mean, how many users do you guys have? How fast are you guys growing?
Sure. I think the better metric as we think about it internally is number of retailers. We're close to 200 retailers at this point. Download numbers are 30,000 a month. Our website's used more than our downloads, our installs on our app. So you can kind of do the back of the envelope math there. And it really is where we spend our time and our effort has seen much better traction than where we've just launched. So Boston and New York, we've been there the longest, are really penetrating much deeper into a market much quicker than we thought and growing at rates, 30%, 35% month over month.
Right, and you guys have some competitors too out there. I know there's another app, Minibar, that seems to be doing some similar stuff. Do you guys expect much competition going forward, and do you expect that to intensify?
There's actually probably a new competitor announced to me too every week, honestly. I was in Dallas for the launch. I'm from Dallas, so I went down there and helped, and I think 2 more launched in the last 2 weeks. It's very easy to say, I've launched an app and I'm in a city. What's hard is to actually deliver on that, to deliver profitability to a retailer, to generate the consumer awareness, and the software to do this all very well. There's a lot of companies out there. Not many of them are going to be real, but there are some that are going to be, I think, good for us at the end of the day, continue pushing us.
Right. So what's the size of the prize for you guys? Because clearly this is a totally new frontier.
Sure.
You're still just convincing consumers to, purchase their booze through an app, to not go to the store, to use their phones. How big can this thing get?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's the only one venture capital people seem to ask to start the meeting.
I don't know what that says about me. So.
It's good. It's good. I think the first thing is, one, we're right in the middle of a mobile evolution to where mobile commerce is becoming incredibly important. I was laughing on the way over here. I booked a hotel tonight. I ordered food, and I was in an Uber on the way over here, all done with my phone. It's becoming part of who you are and how you interact with the world. Right in the middle of that, you're in a $100 billion off-premise alcohol industry. Only 1% of that, maybe 2%, is e-commerce related. I think that's going to 10 to 12%. And then you're also in the middle of a shift from physical to digital advertising. As we introduce digital and direct advertising to some of the suppliers, that's a $6 to $8 billion industry in itself. And I can tell you the Pernots and Diageos and some of those big spenders are pushing 25, 30, 35% of their ad spend is going to go into digital means. So you're right in the connexus of three very big shifts. I don't know exactly where that could take us, but I can tell you I'm optimistic that it's big enough to continue trudging along.
Right, and I mean, clearly you guys are still partnered with some big operators, some big alcohol companies.
Sure.
What's the opportunity for a smaller craft brand?
Yeah, I think the last part I was hitting on, when we launch markets, we are a craft brand. And I think we're finding the most traction and understanding with other local craft brands. I think at some point it does make sense to partner with an Anheuser-Busch or a Miller Coors. At the same time, I think we are more finding our focus today with the local craft brands. One, on product moved, and then two, it's a mutual learning as we grow together. I think as we grow the e-commerce market in general, it'll be a nice feedback loop for everyone involved. So honestly, today I'm more focused on craft brands than I am on some of the bigger ones.
And obviously, though, I think the most popular app for craft brewers and for craft consumers is Untappd.
Sure.
There's certainly plenty of people that go in there, check in the beers they're drinking. What kind of synergies do you guys have with an app like that? And is there any way for you guys to partner with what is the craft beer app, pretty much?
Yeah, absolutely. They do a great job of embracing the social fabric that is inherent in alcohol. Loved Untappd myself. We partnered with Distiller, which is a whiskey and bourbon app that does recommendations. And what we did was embed our API to show this functionality to say, oh, I'm reading about this. All of a sudden, there's a Deliver Now button at the bottom as I'm reading about this product. That same potential exists with Untappd. I think what's been lacking, and Untappd's been incredibly successful, is merging e-commerce with that social aspect. We can do that incredibly seamlessly. What kind of remains to be seen whether they are two different properties or they get embedded in one piece. But last mile is always a valuable proposition when you have willing and able and intelligent buyers who are researching and talking about their social habits. Yeah, I think that's where we're moving the app in general.
And certainly there are some, I think, more wine-focused apps, sure, like Delectable that do that very well. People that go in there to discover new wines or at least keep track of what they're drinking, and then they can buy it right on the spot.
Absolutely.
That clearly is sort of the way things are trending. Why have consumers been so reluctant, at least up until this point, to sort of hand off their shopping experience to their mobile device?
I don't know if I completely buy that whole premise. I mean, you are inventing a market in some ways. We are changing behavior from going to a store. So that does require a shift quite a bit. It is not as simple as saying I was going to get a taxi. I would rather have that taxi come to me because that was something I was already doing. I think Uber faced a slightly easier problem. But I do think mobile e-commerce is taking off. But on the alcohol side, controlled substance, never have you been able to get anything. Delivery exists, but not in our paradigm. And when you are dealing with a controlled substance, I think the awareness of a shift in an industry that is rather averse to change takes a little time. And so that's what we're trying to change, and it's going to be slow and methodical, and that's what we're looking to do with your help as well, is not only educate them about your brands, but with Drizly as well, and at the end of the day, hopefully move some more product to consumers through that.
Right, and a big piece of sort of your guys' platform is obviously the location-based or the locality, sure, of ordering a product and having it within a certain distance from where you're located. How do you see that piece evolving as more and more retailers begin to partner with Drizly? Do you ever envision a point in time where maybe the consumer can actually select which retailer he or she is supporting?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are business, both fiscal and practical realities when we started to say, there are so many retailers we can work with initially. We got to grow the value of that market. You can add more retailers at that point. There are regulatory concerns in some states. In Boston, there's a certain amount of license that you can have. Texas, we're working with a big chain. At some point, it's incumbent upon us Let me back up one more time. Not every retailer is equipped to work with Drizly at this point, which is to say, there's a criteria. You need to have live inventory. You need to know what's in your store. You need to be a professional organization. There's about 6 or 7 other. They're listed out, and if you don't fit them, we're going to have trouble working with you today and serving consumers well. At some point, it's incumbent upon us as we grow to make the technology so seamless that if that store isn't ready for us, we can convert them to be ready with the Drizly store. Eventually, what we would like to do, and this is going to be a slow process, similar to Amazon in terms of how they've onboarded new vendors, we'd love to give consumers choice. What is it that you want? Do you want the long tail of inventory which doesn't exist in the store next to you? Do you want the best price? Do you want a delivery time which can only be done by this store? And then let you choose. It's a different competitive environment, and I think one that has a lot of interesting dynamics that aren't fully appreciated yet. But I think that's really where we're trying to move over time. It's going to be a while.
Right. And, sort of final question here for you. I'm sure, I mean, I got a million questions I'd love to ask, but clearly over time, one of the things that I think brewers, retailers, I mean, pretty much nobody has really cracked the code on being able to sell craft beer direct or even through a retailer.
Sure.
And have it be mailed, actual shipping of product. It's not something that currently happens. If it does, it happens pretty much illegally or in some kind of black market. You guys are more on demand, obviously. Do you ever envision a time where you guys are, starting to change the laws so that craft brewers can actually ship, or so that you could potentially ship on their behalf? Because I know there's a lot of fans that would like to get a beer from different places but can't.
Sure. So let me start with 2 facts of our business to date. The first being, we advertise on demand a lot. We are scheduled. We are taking that to on-demand scheduled and anywhere in between. So that exists already. The second part is who our consumer is. I mentioned this with the profitability to the retailer and that value proposition. We sell more craft beer, craft spirits, as well as wine than any buyer you would see in a store. And that adds to an average order size closer to $75 rather than the $20 to $25 you'll see in a store. So to that point, we are indirectly already doing that. I don't know that we'll ever dip our toe into trying to change laws to allow for direct shipping. It's not really our place. We're trying to accelerate e-commerce within the industry as it stands. Whatever facet that may come, we will absolutely work with it, but I don't know it's ever going to be our prerogative to try to change direct to consumer. I think as we've gotten smarter on the industry, and we still have a lot to learn, the 3 tiers have become more apparently good to me than I initially thought from the outside. And so still trying to appreciate how that needs to change over time is, I think, anyone's guess, and I think there's a lot of lobbyists in here that know better than I do.
Well, it's going to definitely be interesting to see how all that evolves, how your company continues to mature, how the e-commerce space in general for alcohol delivery continues to evolve, and certainly you guys are at the forefront of it, so thank you for joining us.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Cheers.